Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases ever recorded in the history of the Arkansas backwoods. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you are watching from and the exact time you are listening to this narration. We are interested in knowing which places and what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. On a humid June morning in 1911, Dr. Marcus Thornton of Little Rock received a telegram that would end his career and nearly cost him his life. The message was brief. Come immediately. Girl in Polk County can kill with her hands. 3 dead already. Bring no one. Tell no one. It was signed by Dr. Robert Hayes, Thornton's former colleague who had left university medicine 2 years earlier to practice in rural Arkansas. Thornton dismissed the telegram as either a hoax or evidence that Hayes had suffered some kind of mental breakdown, but something about the desperate tone compelled him to investigate. What he discovered in the remote backwoods of Polk County would haunt him for the rest of his life and would lead the medical establishment to make an unprecedented decision: to deliberately suppress and destroy all evidence of Lily Hammond's existence. This is her story, and the reasons why science chose to forget her. The year 1911 found America in a period of rapid scientific advancement. The germ theory of disease was revolutionizing medicine. X-rays were revealing the hidden structures of the human body. Electricity was transforming daily life. Science seemed capable of explaining everything, of solving every mystery through rational investigation and empirical evidence. But in the remote valleys and dense forests of western Arkansas, far from universities and laboratories, something was occurring that science would prove unable to explain and unwilling to acknowledge. Polk County in 1911 was frontier country, rugged terrain where the Ouachita Mountains rose in densely forested ridges, cut by swift rivers and streams that made travel difficult even in good weather. The county seat, Mena, was a small town of perhaps 1,500 people, connected by rail to larger cities but surrounded by wilderness that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Beyond Mena, scattered throughout the forests and valleys, were isolated settlements where families lived much as their grandparents had lived, farming small clearings, hunting, existing in near-complete independence from the modern world emerging elsewhere. Lily Hammond was born in March 1894 in a settlement called Cedar Ridge, approximately 20 miles southwest of Mena. The community consisted of perhaps a dozen families, all related through generations of intermarriage, living in log cabins scattered across a narrow valley. Lily's father, Joseph Hammond, worked as a hunter and trapper, providing meat and furs for the family, and occasionally trading surplus at the general store in Mena. Her mother, Ruth, kept house and raised their 7 children in conditions of profound poverty, but relative self-sufficiency. According to records preserved in the Polk County Historical Society, Lily attended no formal school. There was no school in Cedar Ridge, and the distance to Mena made regular attendance impossible for children whose labor was needed at home. Lily learned to read from her mother, who possessed a Bible and a few other books, and learned practical skills necessary for survival in the backwoods. By all accounts, she was a normal child, neither particularly gifted nor notably troubled, simply another girl growing up in the Arkansas wilderness. Everything changed in February 1911, just weeks before Lily's 17th birthday. According to testimony later given by Ruth Hammond to investigators, Lily had gone into the forest alone to check rabbit snares on the morning of February 12th. She had been gone for several hours when the family heard her screaming. Joseph and Lily's older brothers found her collapsed near the tree line, convulsing violently, foam on her lips, eyes rolled back in her head. They carried her back to the cabin, where she continued to seize for nearly 20 minutes before finally going still and silent. Ruth thought her daughter had died. Lily showed no signs of breathing, no pulse that could be detected. The family prepared for burial, washing the body, laying Lily out in the main room of the cabin. But after approximately 2 hours, Lily gasped suddenly and opened her eyes. She was alive, though profoundly altered by whatever had happened to her in the forest. The first indication that something fundamental had changed came that same evening. Lily's youngest sister, Emma, age 6, had been ill for several days with a fever that would not break. Ruth had been treating her with traditional remedies, but the child was getting worse rather than better. Lily, still weak from her ordeal but conscious and alert, asked to see Emma. When Ruth brought the sick child to her, Lily placed her hands on Emma's forehead. According to multiple witnesses, including all family members present, what happened next was impossible. Lily's hands began to glow with a faint blue light, not bright enough to illuminate the room but clearly visible against Emma's pale skin. Emma, who had been hot with fever and barely conscious, suddenly went rigid. Her eyes flew open wide. She drew in a deep breath and then went completely limp. Ruth screamed, certain that Lily had somehow killed her sister, but Emma was not dead. She was sleeping, peacefully and naturally. When she woke several hours later, the fever was completely gone. She was well, as if she had never been sick. The family was both amazed and terrified. Joseph Hammond, a practical man not given to superstition, nevertheless recognized that something extraordinary had occurred. He questioned Lily about what she had done. Lily struggled to explain. She had felt something, she said. An awareness of Emma's illness, a perception of what was wrong inside her sister's body. She had sensed the fever as a kind of heat that did not belong, and she had simply removed it, drawing it out through her hands. She had not consciously decided to heal Emma. The action had been almost instinctive, as natural as breathing. Over the following days, Lily discovered that her experience in the forest had left her with an ability she could not explain and could barely control. When she touched living things, plants, animals, people, she could perceive their internal states with extraordinary precision. She could sense health and illness, strength and weakness, life and approaching death. More remarkably, she could manipulate these states, could accelerate healing, could stop infections, could mend broken bones with impossible speed. Word spread quickly through Cedar Ridge and surrounding settlements. People began coming to the Hammond cabin seeking Lily's help for various ailments. A man with a festering wound that would not heal. A woman suffering chronic pain from an old injury. A child with a persistent cough. Lily treated them all, placing her hands on the afflicted areas, allowing whatever power she possessed to flow through her. The results were consistently remarkable. Wounds healed overnight. Pain disappeared. Chronic conditions that had troubled people for years simply resolved. But Lily discovered something disturbing about her ability. Healing required effort, required her to draw illness or injury out of others, and process it somehow through her own body before releasing it. After each healing, she felt exhausted, drained of energy, sometimes experiencing symptoms of the illness she had just cured before they faded from her system. Healing others was taking something from her, depleting some resource that needed time to regenerate. More disturbing was the realization that her ability worked in both directions. She could heal, but she could also harm. When she touched living things, she could perceive their vital processes and could accelerate healing. But she could equally well disrupt those processes, could stop hearts, could induce seizures, could kill as easily as she could cure. This aspect of her ability terrified her. She told her mother that when she touched someone, she felt the fragility of their life, felt how easy it would be to simply reach into them and stop the processes that sustained them. In March 1911, Lily accidentally discovered the full extent of her power. A chicken had gotten into the cabin, causing chaos as the family tried to catch it. Lily, frustrated and exhausted from a long day of treating patients, grabbed the bird roughly. The moment her hands closed around it, the chicken went limp and died. No visible injury, no obvious cause. It simply stopped living the instant Lily touched it. Joseph, witnessing this, became deeply concerned. His daughter could heal, which was miraculous, but she could also kill with a touch, which was monstrous. He forbade Lily from treating any more patients until they understood her ability better. He sent word to Mina, asking if there was a doctor who might examine Lily and explain what had happened to her. Dr. Robert Hayes had established his practice in Mina in 1909, after leaving a position at the University of Arkansas Medical School in Little Rock. He was 43 years old, well-trained, and had grown disillusioned with academic medicine, preferring the direct patient care of rural practice. When he received Joseph Hammond's message about his daughter with unusual healing abilities, Hayes was skeptical but willing to investigate. Hayes visited Cedar Ridge in early April 1911. His initial examination of Lily revealed nothing abnormal. She was 17 years old, in apparent good health, showing no signs of mental illness or physical abnormality. Her vital signs were normal. Her neurological function appeared intact. There was no obvious explanation for her claimed abilities. Then Hayes asked Lily to demonstrate. He had brought with him a dog suffering from an infected leg wound, planning to euthanize the animal if Lily could not help. Lily placed her hands on the wound. Hayes watched as her hands began to emit that faint blue luminescence he had been told about. The dog, which had been whimpering in pain, suddenly went still and quiet. When Lily removed her hands 30 seconds later, the wound was visibly improved. The inflammation had decreased. The infection appeared to be retreating. Over the following week, the dog recovered completely, something that should have taken weeks or months of treatment. Hayes was astounded. He had witnessed something that contradicted everything he knew about medicine and biology. Healing did not work this way. Infections did not retreat in seconds. Inflammation did not disappear under someone's hands. Yet he had seen it with his own eyes, had documented the dog's condition before and after Lily's treatment. The evidence was undeniable. Hayes returned to Mina and wrote to his former colleagues at the University of Arkansas, describing what he had witnessed. Most dismissed his letter as delusional or the result of trickery. But Dr. Marcus Thornton, who had worked closely with Hayes for several years and trusted his judgment, was intrigued. Thornton was a physiologist who specialized in studying unusual biological phenomena. If Hayes claimed to have witnessed impossible healing, Thornton wanted to investigate personally. In May 1911, Thornton traveled to Mina to meet with Hayes. The two doctors discussed the case extensively before deciding to visit Cedar Ridge together. They brought with them various scientific instruments, cameras, and specimens for testing. They wanted to document Lily's abilities rigorously, to gather evidence that would convince the skeptical medical establishment. Joseph Hammond was reluctant to allow more examinations of his daughter. Lily had been attracting increasing attention, and some of that attention was hostile. Local preachers had begun warning that her abilities were demonic, that healing without prayer or medicine was ungodly. Some neighbors had started avoiding the Hammond family, fearing that Lily might be a witch. But Lily herself wanted to understand what had happened to her, wanted to know if science could explain her abilities. She convinced her father to allow the doctors to study her. The examination began on May 15th and continued for 5 days. Hayes and Thornton put Lily through exhaustive tests, documenting everything meticulously. They brought various injured or ill animals and asked Lily to treat them. In every case, her healing worked. A rabbit with a broken leg healed in minutes. A cat suffering from a respiratory infection recovered after a single treatment. A dog with a tumor felt relief from pain after Lily placed her hands on the growth. The doctors also documented the blue luminescence that occurred during healing. They photographed it using new flash photography techniques. The photographs, though somewhat primitive by modern standards, clearly showed the glow emanating from Lily's hands. Chemical analysis of her skin during healing revealed elevated electrical activity, far beyond normal biological levels. Her body temperature increased during treatments, suggesting enormous metabolic activity. Most disturbing was what happened when Thornton asked Lily about the other aspect of her ability, the capacity to harm. Lily admitted she could feel the potential to disrupt life whenever she touched living things. To demonstrate, though she was clearly reluctant, she placed her hands on a healthy rabbit. Instead of healing, she consciously tried to harm. The rabbit convulsed once and died instantly. Autopsy revealed that every major organ had simultaneously failed, as if all biological processes had been forcibly terminated at the same moment. Thornton was horrified and fascinated in equal measure. Lily's ability was not simply accelerated healing or placebo effect or trickery. She possessed genuine control or biological processes in a way that violated every known principle of physiology. She could sense the internal state of living organisms and could manipulate that state through means that appeared to be electrical or energetic rather than chemical or mechanical. On the evening of May 19th, after 5 days of intensive study, Thornton and Hayes sat with Lily to discuss what they had learned. Thornton explained that her ability appeared to be neurological in origin, resulting from whatever had happened during her seizure in February. He theorized that the seizure had somehow restructured her nervous system, giving her conscious access to biological processes that were normally autonomic and unconscious. Somehow her nervous system could now interface with the nervous systems of other organisms, could read their states and influence them. But Thornton also had to admit he had no real explanation for how this was possible. The nervous system did not work this way. Electromagnetic fields generated by neurons were far too weak to influence organisms at a distance. Yet clearly Lily could do what he had witnessed her do. The evidence was overwhelming, even if the mechanism remained incomprehensible. It was during this conversation that Lily revealed something she had not told anyone before. Her ability was growing stronger. In February, she could barely heal minor ailments. By May, she could cure serious infections and mend broken bones in minutes. The range of her perception was increasing too. Initially, she had to touch something to sense its biological state. Now she could perceive living things within several feet without physical contact. She was becoming more powerful, and the growth seemed exponential rather than linear. This revelation alarmed both doctors. If Lily's abilities continued to develop at the current rate, where would it end? What would she become in a year? In 5 years? And more troubling, if her ability to harm was growing along with her ability to heal, what would happen if she lost control? She had not already accidentally killed animals. What if she accidentally killed a person? Thornton proposed that Lily come to Little Rock, to the University Medical School, where she could be studied properly and perhaps taught to control her abilities better. Lily was willing, even eager to understand what was happening to her, but Joseph Hammond refused. He would not send his 17-year-old daughter away to be studied like a laboratory specimen. She would remain at home with her family, where she belonged. Frustrated but understanding the father's concern, Thornton and Hayes departed Cedar Ridge on May 20th. They agreed to return in a month to check on Lily's progress and perhaps convince the family to reconsider. They took with them extensive documentation, photographs, measurements, testimonies from witnesses, and specimens from animals Lily had treated. They planned to publish their findings, to present evidence that would revolutionize medicine and biology. They never got the chance. What happened next remains one of the most disturbing sequences of events in the history of American medicine. On June 1, 1911, Dr. Robert Hayes was found dead in his office in Mena. The local doctor who examined the body could find no cause of death. Hayes simply appeared to have stopped living, all vital functions ceasing simultaneously. He was 43 years old, in good health, with no history of heart problems or other conditions that might explain sudden death. Suspicion immediately fell on Lily Hammond. Hayes had been studying her, had documented her ability to kill with a touch. Had she traveled to Mina and murdered him to prevent him from publishing his findings? But investigation quickly eliminated this possibility. Multiple witnesses placed Lily at Cedar Ridge on June 1st. She had not left the settlement. The distance to Mina, more than 20 miles of difficult terrain, made it impossible for her to have traveled there and back without being noticed. On June 3rd, Dr. Marcus Thornton received the telegram from Hayes that opened this story. A telegram sent 2 days after Hayes' death. Come immediately. Girl in Polk County can kill with her hands. 3 dead already. Bring no one. Tell no one. But Hayes was already dead when the telegram arrived. Who had sent it? And who were the other 2 dead the message mentioned? Thornton, deeply disturbed, traveled to Mina immediately. He arrived on June 5th to find the town in a state of barely suppressed panic. Dr. Hayes was dead under mysterious circumstances. His assistant, a young man named Thomas Chen, was also dead, found in his boarding house on June 2nd with no apparent cause. And most disturbing, a journalist named Frederick Stone, who had been asking questions about Hayes' research on a girl with healing powers, was found dead on June 4th. Again, with no obvious cause. 3 deaths in 4 days. All connected to the investigation of Lily Hammond. All impossible to explain through conventional means. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Everyone who came into close contact with the documentation of Lilith's abilities died mysteriously. It was as if the knowledge itself was lethal. Thornton, despite his fear, went to Cedar Ridge on June 6th. He needed to see Lily, needed to understand what was happening. When he arrived at the Hammond cabin, he found the family in crisis. Lily was very ill, burning with fever, barely conscious. Ruth Hammond explained that Lily had collapsed 3 days earlier, on June 3rd, and had been deteriorating ever since. She would not eat, could barely drink, and seemed to be wasting away before their eyes. Thornton examined Lily and was shocked by what he found. The girl was dying, and he could not determine why. Her vital signs were weak but stable. She showed no signs of infection or disease, yet clearly something was consuming her from within. Thornton stayed at the cabin for 2 days, monitoring Lily, trying everything he knew to help her. Nothing worked. On June 8th, Lily woke briefly from her fevered state and spoke to Thornton. What she told him would haunt him for the rest of his life. She explained that her ability had continued to grow, had grown beyond her control. She could now sense every living thing within a quarter mile, could feel their biological processes, their health, their vitality. The constant awareness was overwhelming, like trying to listen to hundreds of voices speaking at once. She could not block it out, could not stop perceiving the life around her. More disturbing, she could feel herself affecting that life. Without trying, without wanting to, her ability was reaching out to living things and draining them, drawing their vitality into herself, consuming their life force to fuel the impossible biological processes occurring in her own body. She was becoming a parasite, feeding on the living things around her, killing them slowly to sustain the power growing within her. Lily told Thornton that Dr. Hayes had died because he had spent so much time near her during the examination. Her ability had reached out unconsciously, had drained his life force gradually over those 5 days, until his body simply could not sustain itself any longer. The same had happened to his assistant, who had briefly helped with the examination. The same was happening to her family, though more slowly because they had natural resistance built up from years of proximity to her. And now, Lily explained, she was dying because she was trying to stop it, was using all her will to contain her ability, to prevent it from reaching out and killing everything around her. The effort was consuming her. She was essentially killing herself to protect others, and she could not maintain this much longer. Soon she would either die from the effort, or her control would break, and everyone within her range would die. Thornton, terrified and yet compelled by scientific curiosity, asked if there was any way to stop the process, to reverse what was happening. Lily said there was only one solution. She needed to die before her control broke completely. Needed to die in a way that would ensure no one else examined her body. No one else tried to study her condition, because she believed her ability might persist after death, might be contagious somehow, might spread to anyone who came into contact with her remains. She begged Thornton to burn her body when she died, to tell no one what had happened, to destroy all the documentation from the examination in May, to forget she had ever existed. The knowledge of her existence, the evidence of what she could do, was too dangerous. If science studied her seriously, if researchers tried to understand or replicate her abilities, the consequences could be catastrophic. Thornton was torn. As a scientist, he wanted to preserve the evidence, wanted to understand this extraordinary phenomenon. But as a human being, he saw the terror in Lily's eyes, understood the genuine danger she represented. He made a decision that would end his scientific career but might save countless lives. He agreed to Lily's request. Lily Hammond died on June 9, 1911, at approximately 3 in the afternoon. Thornton was present along with Lily's family. Her final moments were peaceful. She simply stopped fighting, released her control, and allowed her biological processes to shut down. She died quickly and quietly, a look of relief on her face. The moment she died, the blue luminescence that had been faintly visible around her body throughout her illness flared brightly for several seconds, then faded completely. Whatever power she had possessed was gone, dispersed into the air, or perhaps into the earth beneath her. Thornton kept his promise. Working with Joseph Hammond, he carried Lily's body to a clearing far from the cabin. They built a large fire, hot enough to reduce bone to ash. They burned Lily completely, until nothing remained that could be examined or studied. They scattered the ashes over a wide area, ensuring no one could ever recover any trace of her physical form. Then Thornton returned to Mina and carried out the second part of his promise. He broke into Dr. Hayes' office and took all the documentation from the examination in May. Photographs, measurements, tissue samples, written observations, testimonies. He took everything, carried it to a remote location, and burned it all. Every piece of evidence that Lily Hammond had existed, that she had possessed impossible abilities, that science had witnessed something inexplicable. All of it was destroyed. The death of Frederick Stone, the journalist, remained unsolved. Officially, Hayes, Chen, and Stone had all died of natural causes, sudden cardiac events that sometimes occurred in apparently healthy people. The timing was unfortunate coincidence. There was no pattern, no connection, no mystery, just tragedy. Thornton returned to Little Rock and resigned from the university. When colleagues asked why, he said only that he had lost his passion for research, that rural practice appealed to him more than academic medicine. He never published anything about Lily Hammond, never spoke publicly about what he had witnessed in Cedar Ridge. He kept his silence for the rest of his life, until his death in 1947 at age 73. But he kept a private journal, documenting what had happened in those weeks in June 1911. The journal, discovered among his papers after his death, provides our only detailed account of Lily Hammond's case. Thornton's daughter, reading the journal, initially thought it was fiction, a story her father had written. But further investigation revealed documents supporting the basic facts: death certificates for Hayes, Chen, and Stone, records of Thornton's trips to Polk County, testimonies from Cedar Ridge residents who remembered the girl who could heal with her hands, and who died mysteriously in June 1911. What really happened to Lily Hammond? The evidence suggests she genuinely possessed some form of biological manipulation ability, possibly based on electromagnetic or bioelectric phenomena we still do not fully understand. Her seizure in February 1911 may have restructured her nervous system, giving her conscious access to and control over biological processes normally regulated unconsciously. This would explain her ability to accelerate healing, to disrupt vital functions, and eventually to drain life force from nearby organisms. But why did her ability grow exponentially, and why did it ultimately become parasitic, consuming the life around her? Thornton theorized in his journal that Lily's ability required enormous energy to function. Initially, this energy came from her own metabolic processes, but as the ability grew stronger, her body could not generate sufficient energy. Her ability began drawing on external sources, draining life force from nearby organisms to fuel itself. This created a positive feedback loop. The more energy her ability consumed, the more it grew. The more it grew, the more energy it required. Eventually, it was consuming everything around her just to sustain itself. Modern biophysics offers some possible explanations. We know that biological systems are electrical in nature, that neurons communicate through electromagnetic signals, that cells maintain electrical potentials across their membranes. We know that these electrical fields can be measured, can be manipulated through external electromagnetic sources. Perhaps Lily's seizure had damaged or restructured portions of her brain that generate and regulate these fields, giving her unprecedented control over bioelectrical processes. But this still does not explain the range or power of her abilities. Electromagnetic fields generated by biological systems are weak, measurable only at very close range with sensitive instruments. How could Lily sense and influence organisms from several feet away? How could she drain sufficient energy from them to sustain the exponential growth of her abilities? How could her touch instantly stop all vital functions in a complex organism? These questions remain unanswered. The evidence was deliberately destroyed. The witnesses are long dead. All we have are testimonies recorded decades later by people with fading memories and Thornton's journal, which reads more like horror fiction than scientific documentation. Yet the basic facts appear solid. Multiple people died under impossible circumstances. A girl in rural Arkansas displayed abilities that contradicted known biology, and the medical establishment chose to suppress rather than study this phenomenon. Why did they suppress it? Thornton's journal provides the answer. The medical establishment feared that publicizing Lily's case would either lead to witch hunts against people with unusual abilities, or worse, would lead to attempts to replicate or weaponize those abilities. If Lily could kill with a touch, what would happen if governments or militaries tried to create soldiers with similar powers? What if the research itself proved dangerous, as the deaths of Hayes, Chen, and Stone suggested? What if knowledge of Lily's abilities was somehow contagious, spreading to researchers who studied her and transforming them in unpredictable ways? The decision was made at the highest levels. The case of Lily Hammond would be suppressed, records would be destroyed or sealed, witnesses would be encouraged to forget. The story would be dismissed as folklore, as rural legend, as superstition. Science would turn away, would refuse to investigate, would pretend it had never seen anything that contradicted its understanding of biology. But the suppression was not complete. Rumors persisted. Stories spread through the Ozarks about the girl who could heal and kill, who had burned bright and brief before consuming herself. Folklorists collected these stories. Historians noted references in local records. Researchers occasionally stumbled across fragments of documentation that had escaped destruction. In 1954, a historian at the University of Arkansas found references to Dr. Hayes' research on unusual healing in Polk County in 1911. Intrigued, He tried to locate Hayes records. They had been destroyed. He tried to find census records for the Hammond family. The pages covering Cedar Ridge in the 1910 census were missing. He tried to locate death certificates for Hayes, Chen, and Stone. They existed but provided no useful information. He tried to visit Cedar Ridge to interview elderly residents who might remember. The settlement had been abandoned decades earlier, its residents scattered, its location nearly impossible to find without local guides. The historian concluded that something had happened in Polk County in 1911, something involving a girl with unusual abilities, something that the medical establishment had deliberately suppressed, but without access to primary sources. Without living witnesses, without physical evidence, he could not determine what that something had been. He published a brief paper noting the anomaly, suggesting that future researchers investigate further. No one did. The case remained buried, deliberately forgotten, a historical curiosity that led nowhere. Until 2003, when Thornton's journal was finally unsealed and donated to the University of Arkansas's Medical Sciences Archives by his granddaughter. The journal provided the first detailed account of what had happened in those weeks in June 1911. Reading it was like stepping back in time, into an era when science encountered something it could not explain, and chose to forget rather than acknowledge. Should science have investigated Lily Hammond more thoroughly? Should attempts have been made to understand her abilities, to learn from them, perhaps to help others who might have similar conditions? Or was Thornton right to destroy the evidence, to suppress the case, to protect the world from knowledge that might prove too dangerous to possess? These questions have no clear answers. What we know is that Lily Hammond existed, that she possessed abilities that defied explanation, that she used those abilities to heal until they began to kill, and that she died young, destroyed by the very gift that had made her extraordinary. We know that science witnessed something impossible and chose to look away, to pretend it had never happened, to bury the evidence so deep that even now, more than a century later, we can barely piece together what occurred. Lily Hammond's grave, if it can be called that, is a clearing in the Arkansas forest where her ashes were scattered. No marker indicates the location. No record specifies the exact coordinates. The people who knew where it was are all dead. The settlement where she lived has vanished, reclaimed by forest. Only the stories remain, passed down through generations, growing more distorted with each telling, until most people dismiss them as folklore rather than history. But the fear remains too. The fear that drove science to suppress evidence, to destroy records, to silence witnesses. The fear that some human abilities are too dangerous to study, too powerful to understand, too terrible to acknowledge. The fear that knowledge itself can be lethal, that some truths should remain hidden, that we are not ready for everything the universe might reveal about the nature of life and consciousness, and the limits of human potential. If you found this case as disturbing as I did, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from, what time it is where you are, and whether you believe science was right to suppress this case, or whether the evidence should have been preserved regardless of the danger. Share this story with anyone interested in the cases science tried to forget, the abilities that defied explanation, and the question of whether some knowledge is too dangerous to possess. Because Lily Hammond was real. Her abilities were documented by trained scientists. Multiple people died under circumstances connected to her case, and science chose to destroy the evidence rather than try to understand it. That decision, made more than a century ago, shapes what we know and do not know about the limits of human biology, about abilities that might exist but remain unacknowledged, about phenomena that science has deliberately chosen to ignore. This is the story of the genius girl science feared to touch. The girl who could heal and kill with her hands. The girl whose abilities grew beyond control. The girl who died to protect others from her own power, and the girl whose existence was erased from scientific record because what she represented was too dangerous to allow the world to know. Lily Hammond. Remember her name. Even though science tried to make us forget, remember what she could do even though the evidence was destroyed. Remember the price she paid for her impossible gift. And remember that sometimes the most disturbing mysteries are not the ones we cannot solve, but the ones we deliberately choose not to investigate, the questions we refuse to ask, the truths we actively suppress because we fear what the answers might reveal. Welcome to the case science feared. Welcome to the story they tried to erase. Welcome to the horrifying truth about Lily Hammond, and why her existence challenges everything we think we know about biology, consciousness, and the boundaries of human ability. She was real. She was extraordinary. She was terrifying, and science chose to forget her. This is why